Hello and welcome to a fun discussion about Star Wars: The Last Jedi. I'm Ben Hansen, joined by Matt Miller.
Hello.
Joined by Andrew Reiner.
Hello.
Jeff Cork.
Are we meant to have seen this film?
If you have not seen Star Wars: The Last Jedi, and I don't know who out
Raise
there
your
in the
hand.
world hasn't, yeah, that's right. This is a discussion about what we want from Star Wars: The Last Jedi.
Okay,
That
perfect.
seems the appropriate time for that, right?
Yeah, I think
Nobody's
so.
seen it yet.
No, we're going to spoil every aspect of it, so please only watch this video and only send it to your friends, which we desperately want you to send it to your
Yes.
friends if you've seen Star Wars: The Last Jedi. We haven't really talked about it amongst each other yet, so I'm excited to have especially Matt Miller here, Star Wars fan number 1, Reiner, Star Wars fan number 1.5, and Jeff Cork, the cynical
I
old
like
grouch
Star
on the
Wars.
island.
I know. They're good, fun movies.
Fantastic. All right. Miller, I'm most curious about your opinion. No offense to you two wonderful gentlemen.
Why me?
I don't know. You're the most eloquent.
No.
What did you think of Star Wars: The Last Jedi in general, before we really dive into details here?
Well,
Oh, boo.
no, I mean, I think you're picking on me because you know there's some things that I don't like about this
Jeff
movie.
Cork, what do you think about Star Wars: The Last Jedi?
I thought it was super fun.
Super fun
Yep.
is the overall critique.
Absolutely. I'm not quite as eloquent as Matt Miller, which you made a point of calling out, so I want to reinforce that.
Yeah.
No, I watched it this weekend with my wife and children, and we left universally. We all had a really good time with it. Loved it. Thought it was really fun.
I really thought of you in the beginning, Cork. Just to tip my hand a little bit.
Huh?
I think this is the best opening to a Star Wars movie ever. Like, I think Poe's run, the entire bombing sequence, outside of it's weird that bombs fall without gravity, but the entire bombing sequence, then transitioning over to like the good joke of seeing Finn walking around in the weird bodysuit, squirting out all that stuff. Then the transition directly into the punchline, which I cannot get enough of. Also, I like Poe's joke about messing with Snoke. But when then Luke just tosses the lightsaber, the idea after years of build-up, and he
Yes.
gets the lightsaber and just tries to toss it in the ocean was like, perfect.
It was perfect
I'm
because,
so on board for this.
like, to get in the mood for this, we rewatched Force Awakens.
Yes.
And I had forgotten how long that interaction building up to where she just extended her arm for what must have been a good 4 minutes as that helicopter just panned around
Yeah.
and did a few
She
laps.
eventually got her
The
other
music
arm to
builds.
support it.
Yeah. It just seems like a very, maybe, again, these were all aliens. So it just seemed like a very alien concept that you would just walk up to somebody and go like this and not say, holy shit, you're Luke Skywalker,
Right.
or I believe this is yours, or something, just to go.
And just stare blankly. Maybe she
Yeah.
wanted them to use the Force to pull it out. She's like gripping
Yeah.
as tight
You
as
know,
she could.
It's
like
a very
dog
good
toy.
moment for a movie.
I
you
feel like we're digressing into a different
No,
movie, but
no.
I do remember someone at this table, I think maybe you and I have discussed about like the fact that you're right that it's weird that she's holding it for so long, but as the ending to that movie, there is no line that can be said that would be better than what happens.
Hold on to your butts. Or it's
Well,
about to
okay,
get
you solved
wild.
it. You
Yeah.
solved it, Ben. That's
yep.
the answer. But you know what I mean? Like that the movie ending in that silent exchange is one of my favorite Star Wars moments.
Absolutely. I like the moment that it's silent, but it's silent
It's
for
weird.
such an embarrassingly long period of time.
So-
But anyway,
I thought it was weird until I brought my daughter to go see Santa, and they had that exact same moment of her looking at him, him looking at her looking at him, and then he finally said, "Do you want to come over?" And she took off.
Then he grabbed her Christmas list and
I was
threw
like,
it into
"That's
the
just like
ocean.
the end of Force
she
Awakens."
blew past Chewbacca and like put her face down on the seat of the Millennium Falcon. and
That's
started
pretty
bawling.
great.
This
Reiner,
is
you've
the
been-
worst spoiler cast of all time, by
Yep.
the way.
No more kid talk. What did you think about this movie?
I thought it was exciting, unpredictable, and it really kind of expanded what we can expect from Star Wars in the the sequels and new series that come years from now. I thought Rian Johnson did a phenomenal job of faking you out, thinking something was going to happen, and then surprise you with something that was really interesting or exciting.
Well, let's just dive right into it. I mean, what was, do you think, the biggest surprising moment for you in this film? The most that you made you go, holy shit.
Yoda,
Yeah.
we've
Oh my God.
and not just him showing up, but we've heard forever that I will become more powerful than you could imagine. And what did that lead up to at this point? Ghosts,
Yeah.
hanging out for victory poses, saying hi to the family. But you see Yoda show up here, and then he uses his power. He torches a tree, and
Do you think Yoda, how about you show up in Kylo Ren's hut when he's sleeping and shoot a lightning bolt up his ass? Like, if he can shoot lightning whenever he wants. Anyways, it's so easy to get nitpicky and stupid and nerdy with this stuff, and that's not what this
Stupid,
conversation
for
is
sure.
about. So
yeah.
Yoda's appearance, yes.
Yeah, I thought that was cool, and now it's like all bets are off, and even what Luke said to Kylo about
See you around, kid.
I'll see you around. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait to see what JJ does with this stuff in the next one.
So the next one's Star Wars Episode 9, Ghost to Palooza, I think.
That's what it's going to be
Jamboree.
called. It's
Yeah.
Ghost to Palooza.
It's called Black Diamond right now. That's the working title for
Yeah,
9.
yeah. I wonder. It's X. I was curious. But so just the Yoda thing in particular. Did everybody else have that reaction? First of all, it's funny that in one of the first trailers or shots, there was a rock on Octu that everyone's like, that rock kind of looks like Yoda.
Oh,
I think
yeah,
Yoda's
yeah.
gonna be on that island. And it's funny that it wasn't Yoda, but then it kind of accidentally led people in the direction of, yeah, totally, Yoda's going to be on that island. Did everybody have the reaction, though, of when he first appeared and kind of that wide shot of like, is he CG?
Yep. Immediately, I was like, "Is this
Okay.
puppet Yoda? Because I want that."
Yeah.
And then the close up when it makes it so clear that it's puppet.
Yeah.
I got choked up. I got choked up a couple times in this movie, not
3
during the
times for
deaths.
me. I got
Ooh,
choked up. Yeah.
Okay, but the first one was seeing Yoda, and it was such a weird thing. It's like, I've seen Yoda in the prequels,
Yeah.
Clone Wars. I've seen an ass full of Yoda. Why is this making me choked up? And it's just this feeling of like, that's my Yoda that I feel like I
Yeah.
haven't seen since Return of the Jedi.
It's also it's Yoda. It's not just that like you're seeing the Yoda that is yours. You're also hearing from
yeah,
the fully old, wizened kind of character that he was in Empire, and in fact here even maybe more so, right? Like it's Yoda as for me, like one of the things I like best about Yoda's scene here is not only is it the explicit statement of the movie's theme, the movie's central theme of failure, that we get that from Yoda,
sure.
but it's also, I mean, I think it's you could argue that looking at the franchise as a whole, that if you're talking about failure, the most fundamental, the biggest failure of the entire series is Yoda's, and that like his failure to see what was happening in the early movies and what that leads to is a really powerful thing. And I love that in this viewing of that character, we get to see him acknowledge the importance of failure and acknowledge that like we all fail, that you know we all are, as masters we see those who we teach go beyond us, right? And I don't know, I thought that was awesome.
And the fact that it was Yoda, not lording over the galactic Senate,
Yes.
looking like the statesman that he was, but this is Yoda eating Luke's candy bars out of his
Yes.
backpack and acting like a big weirdo.
Honestly,
it's the best version of
It's
Yoda.
so fucking simple, but it's like Yoda laughing.
Yeah,
Like, that's it. That's
Yeah,
what I've
yeah.
been missing from every other version of Yoda since Return of the Jedi. Although I guess Return of the Jedi he wasn't laughing that hard, but Empire Strikes Back, I guess.
Yeah.
And his overall appearance, having the puppet back, Frank Oz doing the voice, fantastic. Did you feel like you got enough of that conversation, Reiner, between I love that he called him young Luke.
Mhm.
Oh, that was
Yeah.
so sweet.
He's
Yeah.
still got a long way to go.
Yeah, right.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
and in that moment, it just started making me think about Luke too, of him being just a monumental failure too, like continuing the bloodline trend of just whoops. Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
Luke trying to kill Leia's son.
I mean,
Amazing.
Luke's arc through this movie is the thing that makes me like it the most. I think we'll probably talk in a little bit about some of the stuff that like didn't work for me, but like Luke and his connection to Rey, all that stuff was so artful and human here, and I really liked it. I really felt like he, we get the sense that he didn't really try to kill Kylo, but the fact that he thought about it.
Well, you can think about it just fine, but when you pull a gun on
Yeah.
somebody, you know what I mean?
I mean, like that moment of that mistake derailing everything.
It made me think when you said that it's Yoda's failure for not reading accurately what was going on with the Emperor and even with Anakin back in the day, right, in the prequels, and that he should have acted on it. It's interesting that it's also... It's weird that Luke basically did what Yoda should have done back then. Is the conversation that easy of just being a little bit more preemptive when you feel like there's some dark shit coming, we got to take this out?
I think that when I mean, again, I don't want to digress too far into talking about all the other movies, but I think talking about The Last Jedi, there's so much stuff that speaks back to the previous movies that it's important that we consider it, including the prequels. Much as some people really dislike the prequels, I think there's some important stuff to the broader fiction that we need to think about there.
Yeah.
When I, growing up as a enthusiast for Star Wars, Yoda is so awesome, and the implication of Yoda is so awesome. When you see him in Empire, he's just this untouchable figure, right?
Yep.
I think one of the most important things that Revenge of the Sith does is Yoda's failure. The fact that we have this legendary figure that we're forced to look at, and I remember seeing that movie and just being like kind of heartbroken by that more than almost anything else. The idea that like Yoda tried and like,
he knew right from the outset in Phantom Menace when they're at the council, like
there's
he was
something.
He knew there was something wrong there.
But he couldn't figure out what it was, and with all his vision and all his power, he still fails. And I think for a long time after watching Episode 3, I tried to circle that in my mind of thinking about the themes of the movie, and maybe Yoda didn't really fail. Maybe Yoda's like, like it was all part of the plan. I eventually came to the fact that that's not what that movie is saying, right? Like, he really did, and he really did go into exile, and it is really sad. And there's a takeaway there, right? And that getting driven, to get back to the conversation about Last Jedi, that is driven home by his appearance here and his recognition, his sort of melancholy recognition that Luke has also faced that same terrible feeling of like having the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he screwed up.
Yeah,
like
he
just
tried too
screwed
much,
up.
like the whole academy, like and bringing in Ren as his, I don't know if you call him the chosen one again, but bringing him in to be a part of this fold, he just lost control of all of it.
I wonder if it would have been helpful if, like, I appreciate movies that don't spell everything out explicitly, but it just seemed like Luke references looking inside of Kylo Ren, and at that moment seeing this unending pool of darkness, or whatever it is. I wish we could have seen that manifest itself in some way,
so we could understand him, why he pulled the lightsaber better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, was he like pulling the wings off of animals, or was he just meditating?
I mean, just got a weird
The
vibe.
implication is more that it's seeing his future, and in the inexplicable way that the Force is presented in those stories, the idea that the future that Luke is seeing is the one that he's about to enable.
And it would have been, I understand, like this movie is not afraid to get weird in that way, and I'm sure we'll talk about Rey's weird sequence where the snapping fingers and everything.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would have appreciated a 4-second glimpse into what that looks like, so we can appreciate what this
abstract.
is
Even.
They gave you a tease in that he said that Ren took some of his students. So it wasn't just like he was like this solo icon of darkness. He was starting to pollute the pool, right, of all these Jedis that were in there, and ended up they together, the Knights of Ren, killed, took down the academy and killed all the Jedi in training.
Not only is it the first for Star Wars in the main series, at least, to have a flashback, which is weird, but also flashbacks with different points of view. Ultimately, are we all landing on Luke's final version as the correct middle ground of he saw a scared kid and he lit his lightsaber out of fear, out of instinct for a second, but then put it away and then tried to course correct it?
I don't think Luke was ever going to kill Kylo.
Well, that's what he went there for.
That is what he went there for, but
he couldn't follow through.
Yeah. I don't. I mean, I think that is completely open to interpretation, but my understanding of that character says to me that like the whole point is that he never would have done it, and the tragedy of that moment is that Kylo reacted in anger and fear in that moment, and had he not, like, it was both of their failures in that moment, right?
Both
like,
kind of succumbed to fear, ultimately.
Yeah, like it's Luke's succumbing to fear, and like I see that this could go horribly wrong, and that it's Kylo's fear that his master is here and is going to kill him. His uncle, for God's sake, is here with a lightsaber, and rather than in that moment, like pausing and thinking, he reacts in anger. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and so on. Right?
Yada,
like
yada, yada, as Yoda once said.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the beauty of that moment and the great tragedy of it.
And I think it adds. I love Kylo Ren as a character. I don't understand people who hate him, but
He's
it also
amazing.
adds to him and where he's coming from, just in trying to turn his back on his entire family at that point. Where it's like, my uncle tried to kill me. Like, I'm going to be more incentivized to take out my dad, just completely nullify the past because this up stuff has happened in the past.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool to see. You saw, Anakin succumb to the dark side and just lose control to it, right? Whereas Kylo is really embracing it. He wants it, right? Like, he's really trying to like do everything he can to close off the light. Where Luke or Anakin was just lost, like in that moment, just he was done.
Yeah, I never really felt a struggle. Yeah,
I mean, one of the other things I really love about the film is the juxtaposition of Rey and Kylo, and their position as characters. They are both characters who are struggling with abandonment. They're both characters who are who are struggling against this sort of nascent power that is growing within them. I really think the thing that the movie says about what separates them is humility. The idea that in that final crucial moment where Kylo makes the same offer that Vader once made to Luke and says, join me, we will rule the galaxy together. Rey turns him down out of her own humility, and the reason he can't bridge the gap and come back to the light side is because of his own boastful, anger-driven pride, right? Like, I love that, that he, that in that moment, that's the thing that separates them. We're led to believe they're both equally powerful, right? They split the lightsaber in half,
maybe
right?
to a confusing degree, yeah.
Right, and they're both deeply hurt people, but like Rey sees the need to be taught. Rey sees the need to have friends and to like connect to other people, and Kylo doesn't. And that's awesome. That's a great and compelling. That's for me what Star Wars is about, is those sort of like broader humanistic themes that are expressed through these ridiculous, over the top sci-fi action moments.
Yeah, I think on the /Filmcast podcast, I devoured too much Last Jedi stuff this weekend, but they had an interesting correct take that maybe is obvious to everybody else, but just the idea that, in the original trilogy, Luke was on the light side, constantly tempted by the dark, eventually leading to confrontation with his father. The main theme, well, maybe the most interesting thread for me throughout the new trilogy here seems to be Kylo Ren to the dark side, tempted by the light repeatedly, and ultimately probably would have had a big confrontation with Leia as the final challenge in Episode 9.
Yep. That's
now,
totally
that's
what
not
that
going to
was
happen.
Be. Yeah.
But it's an interesting take, which maybe brings us to Princess Leia. General Organa, what was that roller coaster ride for you like, guys?
Well, we're starting to touch into the stuff that's a problem for me in this movie.
All right.
There's so much about Luke and Rey and Kylo and the loop of understanding more about the Force that is great in this movie, that I feel like is the core of the movie.
Yeah.
That I feel great about, and the stuff related to the Resistance, the casino, the very bad, awful, terrible plan. Like, everything there starts to me to feel superfluous and character bloated. In comparison with this other stuff. I just don't know what Finn and Poe are doing in this movie, other than like just carrying forward something that, we've introduced these characters, so we've got to keep them going.
I think ultimately that's the point of those two characters, is that they don't know what they're doing really.
That
it's a long lesson
the
for
wild
each of them to
cards,
learn.
right?
Basically,
That
Finn's
may be-
learning the same lesson he learned from Force Awakens of trying to be a coward, and then be like, all right, turns out I have to be in on the team. And then Poe learning throughout the course of 2.5 hours, like, I kind of made a mistake.
Yeah, I mean they certainly carry through on what I was earlier saying about like failure being the central theme of this movie. I think everybody fails, literally everybody fails in this movie.
BB-8 doesn't.
BB-8 doesn't.
He gets pulled in two
You
parts.
might be-
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
But he's able to put himself back together so quickly.
But other than that, there's a lot of that other stuff that doesn't work for me. I don't know why the casino like subplot thing has value, and I it just doesn't totally come together for me there. And there's a bunch of like humor that doesn't land for me from that stuff.
It definitely drops off.
Yeah, I mean, there's some funny jokes, but
yeah, it was a realization of just throughout the course of this thing, like, oh, I don't think my theater has laughed in a while, and it's an oversimplification, and I haven't seen too much of it on the internet. And I hope there's not. Of like, I think from Rose's introduction on, I feel like the momentum of this movie just takes a huge dive. I'm not putting it on her, but it is just that entire subplot, and it's just so frustrating knowing that there is the ultimate ticking clock. Like, the resistance ships are trying to outrun this with their fuel going down, and meanwhile we're taking time on a cliffside to talk about how pretty horses are. It's like, oh my god.
Yeah, that whole thing feels weird to me, and there's so many characters who feel like they don't get their due. I mean, like, what a letdown is Phasma and Snoke for me. Like, both of those characters who are pushed forward in the previous movie as someone that we should, like, pay attention to and give some energy to. And both of them in this film just feel like, how quickly can we shuffle them off stage?
Counterpoint: Boba Fett and Darth Maul.
I don't know that Boba Fett took on a mythology after the movies because people love that armor and they love the idea of a dude with a jetpack and a badass.
They knew what they
hunter.
had when they were making Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
After Empire Strikes Back, admittedly, they did not know exactly.
Here's
they gotta
another
wrap stuff
counterpoint:
up.
the Emperor in the original trilogy.
I think the Emperor in the original trilogy is. I've thought about this a lot because you're right. We don't know anything about the Sith or any of that kind of nonsense.
But
when we
you
see
him in
Return
a
of the Jedi,
hologram in
right?
Empire, and you're like, "There's a bigger fish in this pond."
Yeah,
I think one of the dilemmas here and why it doesn't work for me with Snoke, where it did for me with the Emperor, is that like this doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? We know more things about the Star Wars universe now than we did when we saw Return of the Jedi, and to not, especially when there's a sort of like, because there's that backdrop, there's the lingering question of like, well, where does Snoke come from? How is this other dark side wielding figure of such power and influence? How did this come to be? Because we know that previously we had the Sith, we had Sidious, we had all that sort of stuff. It feels odd to me that we just don't ever get any follow through on that character.
But that's just in this movie. I mean, I don't know how they would ever address it in 9, and if they will.
Well, you got the Knights still at large.
Well, sure. There's so much to talk about here, but with Snoke in particular, now interviews are starting to trickle out, which I love, with Ryan Johnson just spoilerific talking about it. And he's like, look, I mean, it would completely ruin the momentum of the film if he just stopped and told Rey when he first met her, Snoke, like, hey, here's why I'm Darth Plagueis for 30 seconds. And Rey would just be like, I don't know who that is. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
You know, like, it wouldn't fit within the story. And he said, like, not saying he is Darth Plagueis, but just for Rey's story, it's not important. And from his angle, it was, what is the most interesting situation, the most interesting challenge for these characters? And I think it is crazy. It is shocking when Snoke goes down, because it was a moment too where it's like, I don't think I could guess what's going to happen next. I think it would be absolutely fascinating if Rey just grabbed Ren's hand and they ruled the galaxy together. That would be the most interesting angle for me. But where they ended up is also still fascinating. And so doesn't it lead to more mystery, less about one character, but more about just where the series is going? And isn't that worth the sacrifice of one character of Snoke?
I think with respect to Johnson's goals and his desire to maintain momentum, that's not my problem.
Right.
Like, as a viewer, you're beholden to, particularly in a movie like Star Wars, I think you're beholden as a writer and a director to what has come before. This isn't a standalone movie, much as I think Johnson has shaped it to be kind of a standalone movie, which in a lot of ways makes it kind of cool. It's more standalone than a lot of them have been. But he is beholden to what has been presented by the previous creators who had their time at the helm. Whether that was Lucas or Abrams or whoever. And I don't disagree with the idea that if done inelegantly, you could derail the whole thing by a digression into Snoke's background. But the fact is that Snoke was presented as this character who had a mystery around him. Who is he? Where's he from? How does he have this power that we don't get an answer to?
I think if nothing else, Star Wars has proven itself to be a property that lives beyond the scope of the films.
Yeah,
so
agreed.
I think that the background of Snoke will be explored in comics, novelizations, and other avenues if you're at all interested in it.
Maybe.
I think for the purpose of this film, though, I don't know that learning more about him makes the world more interesting and bigger. I think if anything, when they've tried to explain things in the past, you end up with trade embargoes, you end up with midichlorians,
right,
exactly.
which you don't want.
Well,
No,
and
you don't
it's-
want any of
I mean,
that stuff.
Also, another side point is like Yoda. Like, we didn't know anything about Yoda outside. He's just all powerful. We didn't know where he came from, any of that stuff. And
Even what
he was
race
one of our
he
favorite
is.
characters.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a little unfair to say, like, you should get all this stuff, all this background on a character that is dismissed. Phasma, on the other hand, I was surprised when she went down.
Yeah.
Because they talked up such a big game, like she's getting her due, and she did fight.
We saw her eyeball.
But
Yes.
yeah, and then
It was
she
very
was
nice.
Solid eye.
Yeah.
potentially coming back as Deadpool or something. I don't know. But I like that about Johnson, though. It was like every turn that he took, I really didn't expect it. Like when Phasma went down, I was like, holy crap. When Snoke went down, I was like, holy crap again. Luke throwing the saber, even Finn racing toward the big battering ram laser.
Yeah.
I thought he was
Rose coming
done, and then boom, he's not. Like everything he did.
in. Luke's sucking on those boobies.
Vitamins.
You
That's how
really
he's
like
getting his
that
vitamins.
scene, don't you?
Who does? It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so stupid.
He likes colored milk. That's kind of his
He
thing.
loves that colored milk. The only thing we ever see Luke Skywalker drink, colored milk, right?
It's true. He's been
I
living
think.
on it his
I'm trying to
entire
think if
life.
there's ever any other time we see him drink anything else.
He wanted to eat that candy bar. That was his first piece of concrete food, and then
Yeah.
Yoda just stole his little Snickers
But
bar.
we really kind of glossed over Leia's role in
Right.
this, and
Right.
I loved her in this film in that she's dealing with an incomplete deck of cards with the rebellion at this point, right? Like they are on their heels. It's bad news. The First Order, although they destroyed their biggest weapon, are fully mobilized. They took out a lot of the Republic planets, and the Republic's running again, right? Like
It
the
doesn't
rebellion's
exist
running.
anymore, right?
Yeah, I mean,
The Republic's mostly gone, but the rebels are on the run, trying to figure out the resistance, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
How to survive this, how to get an upper hand. And one of those cards that she has in her deck is just an absolute wild card in Poe, in that he always brings results, but you see very quickly, like, there's a lot of sacrifice that's made for this guy to maybe get a little victory here or there.
Yeah.
And her dealing with that, I thought, was very interesting.
Yeah.
And with Haldo as well. Like, I liked how that all wrapped up at the end. Where I like that guy.
It
And
was
it's
nice
like,
to see
yeah.
consequences for the whole Star Wars, make it up as we go along, seat of our pants kind of thinking, which I can assure you, if you try that kind of stuff in real life, does not work out that well.
Right.
It's always good to have at least like a baseline plan.
Yeah.
And in the past, heroes in Star Wars have gotten away with it for way too long. It was nice to see like punishing consequences for that kind of like maneuvering and improvisation.
And then Haldo, like, a lot of people are like, okay, why didn't she tell the crew what they were doing?
Right.
Right. And that's a big thing people are hanging on to. And it's like, well, one, they think they have a traitor amongst them that is reporting where they're going or whatever.
Right.
Two, this wild card just got a bunch of guys killed. They demoted
be
him.
trusted.
He shouldn't be in the room for this.
Yeah.
I'm sure she informed the crew what happened off screen as we were following Poe or something else. But I don't know. I think people are like, they're like, why didn't the fighters keep attacking the ship?
Right.
What
Why
was the
didn't
whole thing
they-
with gas? And it's like, Han Solo in A New Hope called them short-range fighters. There's no way they would be out in deep space. That made sense to me. I like the whole progression of this chase.
I think they could have just gone to light speed though, and apparently taken care of the entire Resistance fleet.
That does seem like kind of odd.
Or just one X-thing through the Death Star in A New Hope.
Right.
Like-
Right.
I mean, talking about Leia, I think one of the things that I thought was a really unusual and interesting choice that Johnson made throughout the film was his focus with Leia sort of leading the charge in this. His focus on the sacrifices that women are making throughout the film. I think there's so much of it, and there's so much conscious choices about the way they cast the film and the way that the script is set up. And by the way, I'm not trying to make any sort of political arguments here one way or the other. I'm just saying that it's like
old soapbox Miller.
It is. It seems obvious to me that Johnson was interested in talking about this topic in the movies, because we see so many times that women are forced to make sacrifices, or they suffer, or they die in the name of like conflicts, many of which are conflicts that are begun by men.
Except for when Rey blasts a hole in that little shack and the little handmade aliens have to clean it up. Yeah, talk about sacrifice.
Like, you have you have the Paige Tico, the sister in the bomber at the beginning. You have Rose who's saving Finn and sacrificing herself to save Finn. Holdo, Rey trying to go and bring Kylo back from the dark side in what is like Luke before her, is a wildly ill-advised dive into the lion's den.
Yeah.
Leia's having to deal with Poe's arrogance and her broader leading of the resistance and trying to save people. I mean, it's not just you can't just brush it off as like a non-factor in the movie. And I thought it was really interesting that they were that Johnson made those choices.
Yeah.
And was kind of trying to explore that idea.
The idea of the entire resistance plot, I wonder how much of it is just we all liked Leia in this movie. I'd imagine a fair amount. But if Leia wasn't in that, do you think you'd be more in the Miller camp of tearing that entire subplot to shreds?
No, I think it all would have worked out the same. It'd probably be Akbar in that role or someone like that, right? Like,
yeah,
or pushing Holdo, that character.
No, I think it's
maybe.
just. I mean, it's more Poe's story than Leia's at that point, right? Like, I think he is kind of the focus of being. Leia had that one moment. I know a lot of people didn't like it. Her out in space, and
we need to talk about that in greater length.
But if you remove that kind of element from it, I think you could have put anyone into that role, right? Like of a general leading this, this army, so to speak, this resistance. But I think it worked, and I really loved how her scenes wrapped up with Luke at the end.
The idea that she gets to reunite with Luke one last time is really, really sweet. I guess that is Carrie Fisher's addition, the line of "I've changed my hair," which is cute.
But real quick to what Miller's saying about Rian Johnson's kind of looking at the world today and putting that into this science fiction story. I think that's where Canto Bight, the casino planet, really, really, really worked for me in that showing a pocket of society in Star Wars we haven't seen before. I thought that made the prequels look much like I liked thinking about the prequels again and seeing royalty, the brief glimpses of kind of the slums of Coruscant. We never really saw this element of society, which is more kind of everyday people. This is like the 1%,
right?
But just seeing like what that's like in this, I love that, because throughout The New Hope, it was like slums off the beaten path, people living in squalor. But here we really saw just how terrible this universe can be. And driven by
putting coins in everything,
but
So
driven by money again. Like I think that's where Johnson was really kind of hammering home, and having the weapons dealer making both the First Order and Resistance vehicles, and you're just like, wow.
I think
I like that a lot.
That's a bit of world building I was really excited to see. Is just kind of like, not like it was a lingering question, but it was kind of like, where do all these ships come from?
Right.
I just assumed that the Empire and the First Order had factories of their own, but I guess it stands to reason that they just outsource everything.
Yeah. And the whole thing with Rose and Finn there, it was like, by the seat of their pants, they're going to do it. They're going to come through, and they were going to get executed, right? Like, I mean, they were on, like, that plan failed horribly. The person they trusted was a terrible person. I liked that. Again, Johnson spun it in a way that I didn't expect.
He didn't redeem himself. It wasn't like Benicio del Toro's character was like, fooled you,
He might pull a full Lando by the end of the next one.
I thought when the ATST started going crazy, I was like, oh, it's that That one stuttering guy.
Instead, it was something dumber.
No, it was something far dumber.
I mean, I like as we were talking about before, the fact that all our lead characters, including Finn and Rose, they do fail in their endeavors. My problem with the whole Canto Bight exchange and all that kind of stuff is that it's not just a failure. It's also that it feels totally meaningless. Like, it doesn't feel like it ever goes anywhere or has any relevance to the broader plot.
I mean, they're going there for their last shot at survival,
and they ignore it.
I get that, but in the way that it all breaks down, if they hadn't gone, our lead characters in the Star Wars movie, right? If we're saying that Finn and Poe and Rose are three of those lead characters, their involvement doesn't do anything. Like, they are sidelined throughout so much of this movie, and in the final analysis, had they not been present, maybe things would have gone just a little bit better.
I find that interesting
You
because
know?
I think that's the whole point of it, is just to show their crappy plan accomplished nothing. It wasted time, and while it was happening, as viewers, I mean, we have the advantage now of looking back on it, but while it was happening, it was like, oh boy, I can't wait to see how they get out of this scrape. And it's like, well, they did ultimately survive, but what they thought they were doing and like this great plan that they were like sneaking by, it was just an abysmal failure.
it backfired. Yeah, and that's, again, I agree with you, Jeff. I really like that because I was like, okay, there's going to be something weird that happens. Oh, they got to the device they needed to.
Mhm.
But
Nope.
They thought they were going to do it. They didn't. I
So,
love that about it.
I like the movie. I like pockets of it in particular, but zooming out, I'm having a tough time, especially with people being like, "Oh, the messages of this film are so strong, so strong." I'm still trying to figure out, as to maybe the failure point, what is the takeaway? Is it be a team player, but there's still going to be the chosen Jedi that you have to worship and who will be the ultimate spark that we need here?
I don't think it's. I mean, not to oversimplify, but I think it's not just failure. Period.
Okay.
It's that failures shape us. Failures shatter us.
They surround us.
they remake us into our future selves. And everything, for all the things that I struggle with this movie and my different perspective from Reiner and Jeff on the Resistance plot and Finn and Rose's and Poe's dumb plan, like, I think that it carries forward that message, right? And I can only imagine that Episode 9 will reinforce the importance of that message, right? That, like, Poe is going to be a different person in Episode 9 as a result of what happens here, as will Finn, as will Rey, as will Kylo. Like, the failures that occur here are important to the broader narrative. I just have times that as a movie, as a film, things feel like they don't have relevance, or it feels like there's too many characters that are being thrown in our faces to care about, and then we shouldn't really care about them.
Like the one big booby alien on the casino planet that they show in a shot.
That's exactly who I was thinking of.
And then Finn's like, what?
Oh, get a look at that one.
But in the midst of all that stuff, you have, even with my frustrations with the film, there are these moments that are really some of the best moments of the franchise. And to say that there's things that I don't love about this Star Wars movie as much as some of the others is kind of like saying, like, well, Rocky Road isn't my favorite ice cream flavor, but I still love ice cream, and I'll eat the Rocky Road.
PUBG and Xbox is acceptable.
I mean, I think that there's some stuff in here that's so great that it balances out for me the things that don't totally work, especially stuff like, Luke's send-off.
Yes.
It's just so great.
Oh, okay.
It's so great for me.
Wow, interesting. We can dive into it. I assume that's one of the moments that made you cry, Ryan, that you were talking about earlier.
That. So I'll just blurt them out. The three for me.
Yeah.
R2 with the Leia message.
So good.
That was great.
So
Yoda,
good.
and then Luke looking at the twin
Twin sons.
sons. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's a nice shot of him levitating, being all powerful. Oh, the twin sons, this is great. He saved the day. Holy crap, he's gone. And I was wow.
It felt abrupt to me too. Like I need to watch it again because I could have sworn I was like, is he looking at like a ship coming in off the distance? And it like cuts to like I think Leia's face. I forget who else's face, and it just felt so sudden. It's like I didn't even have time to feel that. That's not fair.
I would argue that it puts in context all of the times we have seen our great Jedi masters like become one with the Force. It follows through on that. In every case, whether you're talking about Obi-Wan in a moment of conflict, Yoda on his deathbed, or now with Luke, it's this time where we see their full sort of oneness with the Force, right? They become one with the unifying Force in that moment. And what makes it that much better of a moment in this film with Luke is that the sort of twin son viewing that is such an iconic moment from A New Hope, right? And echoing that the exact sort of musical beats there and the visual perspective, that is the beginning of Luke's journey, right? That's the moment when he sits there on that dune looking at the twin suns that everything starts, right? And the idea that Luke's quote-unquote death in this moment is the beginning of his like next adventure is really powerful as a sort of mythological statement. And the idea that this isn't the end for him, but it's the beginning of this new journey that he's about to take, just is awesome.
But just to crap on your point, Miller, Ryan Johnson pointed this out in an interview, and now it's bugging me too. Ryan Johnson said that he watched the film with fans, once it was released, and he said that it was watching that with the crowd then that he realized, oh wait, a big metal hand should have gone clonk and landed on the rock. Like this makes sense, and his clothes would, but then his hand would go with them. Come on. So fart on that. I say no. It's very eloquent, Miller. It's a good point. What did you guys think? Calling it a twist is so weird. The idea that he wasn't actually on the salt planet the whole time, just because it's
I
like
love the whole connection, Force connection stuff.
It just, I felt like, has there ever been any setup for it? It just feels like it's not a fair twist if I have no way of guessing it, other than like I noticed his beard was different. I noticed like something was up, but I never thought that Force projection like that was even a thing.
For me, again, there's so much about Star Wars that for me comes back to sort of thematic interpretations, and what works for me about that scene is the idea that Luke does go back to help his friends and his sister. He does do something heroic in the final act, but there's something really powerful about the idea that what he does is passive. That as a true master Jedi, when he finally reconnects with the Force, he never picks up a lightsaber again. He never like kills someone again, right? He never returns to violence as an answer. He goes and he the weird projection thing, you can argue like, oh well, we haven't set that up that Force users can do that or not. I think that's sort of irrelevant. I mean, it's from the sort of text of the movie, if you want to call it that, they can do whatever they want with the Force. That's the good thing about the Force, is it's this sort of magical power that you can, as a director and a writer, you can change that however you want. What's more important is that what it says about what the Jedi are, what it means to like be part of the light side, and the fact that he goes and he simultaneously saves his friends and lives out the Jedi path in so doing it. And that's what enables in that final scene for him to move on and to die and to become one with the Force, is that he's that connected.
Where do you think he got to? Because there's an interesting beat on Oct 2 when they said that like she didn't see Luke at all, that he had completely closed himself off from the Force.
Right.
So in your guys' mind, where did Luke end up? Was it also acknowledging that Jedis are a failure, the institution was a failure, I'm just going to help my friends this one time because Master Yoda kicked me in the ass? Like what? I don't know where his end state was. What were his thoughts towards the end, do you think, and why he did that?
I think he finally kind of gave in and became one with the Force, right? Like, and
for helping out his buddies, though. That's it. He said he was one with the Force, so therefore I got to help him out.
I think he was like, this is something I need to do, right? Like, I think that's why Yoda's scene is so important. Is like you said, it is a kick in the butt. It is a wake up thing. This stuff doesn't matter. but this is what's really important is, this moment. You need to be there in this moment.
Which is Yoda's great line about you're still looking at the horizon.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, I think Johnson nailed that in this script. And, Miller put it so eloquently of kind of that where it all led. And the final shot is so important is it is a new journey for him. Like we could be seeing more of Luke in the future.
Mm-hmm. It's certainly not a 1-to-1 scenario, but there's some parallels between Luke in his final moments saving his friends by creating a diversion, much the same way that like Obi-Wan distracted Darth Vader before he became one with the Force so that his friends could flee.
Would it have killed Luke, projection
Oh,
Luke,
boy.
just to walk by Poe and be like, go on, get out of here, I got a plan, instead of just like, watch this cool shit. Like, and just hoping that they would be reminded to run away?
Just from a not mechanical, what's the right word? The practical realities of the way they filmed that scene.
Yeah.
There's so many things in retrospect that I think I've only had a chance to see the movie once, and I'm sure I'll see it a few more times in the theater. But there are things that I realize in retrospect that do make that scene all the better in terms
For the
of
twist?
for the way that they do it.
Yeah.
Things like Luke not leaving footprints in the red,
Mm-hmm.
like leaving the red marks in the white sand.
Mm-hmm.
His appearance to Kylo, much more the way that Kylo remembers him compared to like how he actually is now. The battle itself being this sort of like Luke dueling without ever touching.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like all
Yeah.
of those moments, like when you look
Also,
back on them,
Poe saying, how did he get in here anyway?
yes,
Yeah.
Yep.
right. Like all that stuff is totally solid. I mean, again, everything with Luke in this movie works for me.
Mm-hmm. I loved
it's
his
great.
like departing line to Kylo Ren, which is just like a see you around, kid, which is absolutely something that Han Solo probably said to Kylo Ren when he was still Ben.
Yeah,
What do you
Twist the
think
knife.
that means? Just like, hey, watch yourself?
Oh, he's going to be messing with him. That's what I love about
So many
this.
lightning bolts.
Well, I'm glad Johnson expanded upon the Force. Like we were just talking about the projections, like, and then seeing Yoda like just come in and create a storm, and
Mhm.
Burn
that's
it
what
all
a
down.
Jedi can do. Like that is the first time I've been like, oh, that's what it means. You will become more powerful. Like you are one with everything. Like you can
Mhm.
start messing with
And also-
everything.
I also like the message too of it. Like this is not just a Jedi thing, and that's where the Jedi have failed in many ways. Is their like adherence to dogma and
Yeah.
like we have the right path and everything. And I think that Yoda kind of acknowledged that.
Yeah.
Like Luke certainly did. And,
When did Yoda acknowledge that?
I think there is I agree with Jeff. I think there's a recognition of the failures of the Jedi, even by
Mhm.
Yoda, even while also accepting that like he is a Jedi, Yoda is a Jedi, and like it's not that they are completely wrong. It's
Mhm.
that the organization got wrapped up in dogma
yeah.
and politics and stuff like that, and that's where it went wrong. But that I don't necessarily buy the idea that fundamentally this movie argues that the Jedi as a concept of like pursuing the light side of the Force and all that kind of stuff were wrong, but just that the path by which that organization went ultimately was a failure.
Mhm.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I mean, Yoda's big stressing point in Empire is like there is some rigorous training you have to go through, Luke. Don't bail early. This is a whole process.
Yeah.
And then in this one, him saying, Rey knows everything. She's
Well,
all right.
no,
I
he
understand
didn't-
she has the books, and that's what maybe
Yeah,
he's
and
referring to
he-
cryptically.
He
But
didn't want to put her through it, given what just happened to him with his academy, right? Like that whole thing was a disaster,
yeah,
and that created the big problem that they're dealing with now, right? Is he could not harness whatever the training was. That's something we'll never know, probably.
but why would Yoda 180 in the afterlife? I guess is my question. Between training is super important and training, forget about it.
I think that there's a distinction there that Yoda, as a somewhat omniscient figure within the text, is there's a difference between Luke in Empire and Rey. I think Rey is maybe it could be argued a little bit more pure spirit that already has some of the things that she needs to know. I think Luke is still in Empire, Yoda sees that Luke isn't ready yet.
He's still very conflicted.
He's still conflicted, and again, he has his eyes on the future and not enough in the present.
Well, what about? Sorry to cut you off, but I'm going to go for it. What about the idea that when Luke was so horrified of like, Rey, you just went right for the dark pit. You went right for the dark side. Like, there's no hesitation there. I mean, isn't Luke reading into Rey that she's also maybe more eager for the dark side just so she could get answers about her parents?
I think that Rey does have a desperation about her and her own sense of abandonment, but I don't. There's never any malice there. There's never any.
It's not like an acquisition of power that she's into.
Yeah.
Like
She's into the acquisition of knowledge, but
Right.
if that happens to go through the dark side, then so be it. Maybe now she doesn't want that anymore, though. After she learns, Kylo tells her about her parents.
If she stuck around on that island, I question what Luke would have done too.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Just if he did really sense something terrible within her.
Luke's just murdering
And
everybody.
I've seen people talk about this online, and it's an interesting thing. I don't necessarily buy it, but there's some people that think that Yoda wasn't actually there, that was all Luke being batshit crazy. And because he had the torch, he could have done the tree himself, and he was just manifesting this stuff.
Sure.
That's a theory people have, which, I mean, yeah, maybe that works, but
I think it is profoundly less powerful.
Yes,
To put
exactly.
it that way, which is the main reason that I don't buy that.
No
but-
Force ghosts actually exist. All
yeah,
Jedis are
like
a little
that
bit
just
wonky.
feels
man.
like
Yeah.
not.
Just Luke went on Return of the Jedi when the whole family shot. They're looking at it. And Leia's
And
probably
Luke's
like,
just
"What are you
insane."
talking about?"
He's just like watching an Ewok poop in the woods. Yeah. What do you guys think about the other new angle for the Force in this film? The idea of like the Force Skype, if you want to call it that, between Rey and Ren. First of all,
that's
I
the same thing, by the way. Like the projection, right? Like they're
You think so?
Force link, I guess.
well, what
uh,
about the idea that Snoke said he was doing it, but then they did it after Snoke died?
That is a thing I've thought about a lot since the final analysis, whether that's a lie or not.
Yeah.
I think it seemed like an introduction email, like Reiner, Ben, Reiner.
Yeah, maybe so. I
I've
mean,
CC'd Ren
Yeah,
on it.
I mean, once you kind of know, like kind of Rey was picking up
Interesting.
stuff very quickly, and I mean, I guess it was Kylo reaching out a bunch. I guess they both were reaching out. Like there was times where Rey was like, "Not now."
Well,
Oh,
Miller,
I see. I
Kylo
just
like
got out of
just
the
got out of the shower.
just doing some
that
push-ups
was
here, Ray.
really weird.
Yeah.
That's really weird.
They gotta
That's a good
have
joke,
it.
though.
Yeah. What conclusion did you reach, Miller?
I feel like that's not just Snoke's manipulation. Like it feels like the things that link them, as I think I might have mentioned earlier, are like their shared sense of abandonment, their shared incredible like growing power, that they are sort of twins within the Force.
Not literally.
Not literally,
Thank
please.
God.
But that's part of it. I mean, maybe you could maybe make the case that like Snoke helped to push that along, but there's too much about the actual interconnection between the two.
The moment they had in Force Awakens on the cliff,
Yeah.
where they were really like intimate, like something was going on there.
Yeah.
Even when she's being restrained,
Yeah.
they had that moment. So yeah, maybe it started there.
Yeah.
But you also had Obi-Wan in A New Hope, when a planet explodes, he senses that Leia when Han falls. So there's like people are connected. You are, like everything is connected through the Force. But there was Leia when Han fell. That was one moment where it was like very clear, like, oh, she knew immediately something happened. Like she was
Right.
connected to him.
Yeah. Also, just the way they shot the Force Connection, I feel like that's such a maybe just I think so much of Looper and the way that people went back in time of just like appearing in a flash. It was so remarkably simple, and I thought the same thing with the way it was shot with the Force Connection of just like no. Just shot, reverse shot, different locations.
Yep.
You don't need to see any mystical portal, nothing. And it's maybe a little bit confusing, but it's such a cool, abstract way of filming that.
Yeah.
So that when Luke comes out, he's like, "Who are you talking to over there? Is that your boyfriend on the phone? Get me that." It's like you don't know what he sees.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of Gollum in Lord of the Rings doing when Gollum's having conversations with himself.
Yeah.
Just a quick snap of,
Just
of
simple
the
camera
shot.
movement.
Yeah.
Hey,
And
real
it-
quick.
Oh yeah.
Let's talk about that Leia thing real
You really want to get to that,
Okay.
don't
Did you think like this is it?
When
This
she
is
got
how they're sending
when
her
she
off?
got sucked out
Yeah.
after Kylo hesitated and then his wingman took the shot. She got sucked out into space. I thought that is horrible and awesome at the same time. Like
That's how they're going to send her off.
completely unexpected, fantastic. And then Guardians of the Galaxy kind of took over, and I was like, oh boy.
And even then, I was like, is that just pure CG though? Like, what are they doing? Did they not shoot anymore with Carrie Fisher? But then, of course, I remember the trailer, which I wish I didn't see now, and her on the Salt Planet.
Yeah.
So I knew that she was still going to be alive later on, which kind of ruined that moment for
they
me.
shouldn't have had that in the trailer.
Yeah.
But I agree. It was kind of campy, but I like that she finally had a real legit Force moment.
Yeah.
Seeing that, like, kind of establish her as being powerful with the Force. I like that.
In a zero-G situation,
I also
she's
like,
killer.
I mean, when her music kicked in that
Yeah.
moment was very cool, but I agree. Like, it was a little too much even for Star Wars in terms of spectacular and just, like, unexpected.
I was thinking to myself, I'm like, this is dumb, right? This
Yes.
is like a super dumb thing that we're seeing. And
It was a
hate
slow
it.
turn of looking at people next to me like, this is stupid.
Yeah.
Can we laugh
We
at
don't
this?
like this.
The worst, the worst part of all of it, though, is like, okay, she comes back and you're getting like the debrief, and then they just drop in like, oh yeah, Akbar died too.
Right,
I was like, what?
Yeah.
He deserves a hero send off shot.
They should have had a close-up shot of him trying to use the Force.
Or just like, I'm on fire.
Yeah.
Goes
Also,
down.
I saw Reddit was enraged because they're like, dude, Akbar should have had Holdo's role. Like, that would have been
Yeah.
so much more
Oh, yeah, it would've been
interesting
amazing.
if Poe was going up against
Let's
Akbar.
talk about this for a second.
Yeah.
Akbar gone, Snoke
Right.
gone, Phasma gone, Holdo gone, Luke gone. I mean, he racked up most of the
slate, yeah.
resistance. Like,
Yeah.
I mean that's
Whoa.
actually one of to circle back to one of the things that doesn't work for me in the movie is that, like, I feel like this movie contracts the universe more than I would like it to. There's so much that's focused on this single flight through this escape through space, and the characters that are part of it. I didn't feel like this movie does, like most of the other movies, even the prequel movies, which have some big problems. You're always getting this sense of this ever expanding Star Wars universe, and with the exception of the casino thing, which I don't like anyway, where we get a little bit of a glimpse of the, like, upper echelons of society, it feels like so much that happens in Last Jedi contracts down the scope of the universe in a way that I don't like, and by the end, we're led to believe that really the only people worth caring about in the universe can fit on the lounge of the Millennium Falcon.
well, that's
Well,
not true.
and,
The
like-
last shot of the movie.
Yeah, we do. I love the scene with the kid, but we don't. That's not really a character we get to meet.
No,
or
but I think
anything,
it's
right?
the message that's there is there is hope
There
in
is
the
an
galaxy.
implication
They're gonna find them.
of something else out there.
And even before,
doesn't it
even
raise the stakes for Episode 9 if the crew is so small?
I just feel like
It does, yeah.
it does raise the stakes in a sense, but it left me feeling like, again, just like there's too few people and planets and places that we really care about here anymore, and that made me sad.
Anyways, go ahead.
I think when they showed before the kid, Force pulled the broom so
Yeah.
he could sweep, it showed like that story had already become a legend
Yep.
that was way far away from where it had actually happened. So I think that's interesting, just to at least superficially give you a sense that this is bigger than, maybe to your point, than just a few ragtag people on this planet or out of the orbit now, without going to like a montage sequence of like, oh, we got a signal. What is it? Oh,
Right.
they're in trouble. We gotta go over here and help them out.
Right. What's
You
that?
know?
Luke's doing cool Yeah.
This I gotta see.
Yeah, and they kind of leave you. Also, just a side note, Rey killing Snoke is kind of the lasting message there, right? Like,
Mhm.
so she's gonna be
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I
'cause
guess I didn't
Kylo.
think about that.
Yeah, Kylo and Hux.
Yeah.
I love that Hux is his underling now. By the way,
I love also
that
just
switch is hilarious in my opinion.
those two yelling like over each other, like arguing about who's really in control. That could be fun going into the 9.
It's like the old like Vader in a New Hope. How everyone was just like, ugh,
yeah.
stupid superstition. No one takes it seriously. So it's funny to see like Kylo Ren in that role of just like people barely tolerate him.
Yeah.
Do you think he goes full Vader, or is he just unhinged in a way we haven't seen before?
Okay, so this is what I'm trying to remember. I don't know. Have you seen it twice, Reiner?
No, just
Okay.
once.
So when he was making the pitch, which I loved, of just like, Rey, let's burn everything down. Let's start fresh. Forget everything. Forget all these things. Did he list the First Order as a thing to also forget?
No, we
Not
can rule.
not
I think he
explicitly.
said we can rule the galaxy together, or
He
the
did.
universe, or whatever.
But he said
together.
forget the Resistance. I just don't remember if he listed First Order. I think it'd be much more
I
interesting
think
if
it's
he did.
probably implied that he would use his.
I don't remember.
She
that
would
either.
join him
Yeah.
with Snoke. I mean, they're there, right? But Snoke's gone at that point. But I
Right.
think it's implied that he was bringing her in. You know, that
Okay.
that kind of ramp up to, she's going to join us. We're going to rule the galaxy. But then once Snoke's removed, he's like, I will be the one that takes charge. You join me.
Yeah. Did you guys think? I guess if you put a gun to my head, I would have guessed this, but it seems like the internet has the opposite idea. I assumed that those red guards, the Praetorian guards, that those were the Knights of Ren because they all had funky weapons, which is, I think, all I know about the Knights of Ren from that one vague shot.
I felt like the Knights of Ren was another thing that like we didn't get follow through on in this movie, and I am willing to concede that we could in the subsequent film.
Yeah.
But it felt weird that they were absent here after
There's-
the implication of their presence from the previous movie.
There's a theory that Rey's dream in Force Awakens with the rain
Yeah.
showing those, that hasn't happened yet.
Oh, I thought that was when they attacked the temple.
So, yeah, that's what I thought too. But they said that there was no rain involved in that at all. It was just Luke climbed out of the rubble. It was just
Interesting.
bodies everywhere. This is a
And that
very
Kylo
different
did the
shot.
whole thing.
So they're saying that might be a future thing. Like, people are confused by it too, right? Like, so that could be something we see in the future.
So you don't think there's any chance that they were the guards?
There's,
I don't think so.
They would have made that clear.
What do the toys say?
I don't know why. I don't
Listen
know.
to the
I guess
toys.
I don't know why Snoke would just take them.
He made a reference to them.
Yeah,
So it seemed like he was
I
familiar.
would imagine that those were Snoke's troops, and then Ren
Mhm.
has his own
I mean, they're,
posse. So to
they're very
speak, right?
clearly Snoke's guys, right? Like
Yeah.
the whole
God,
thing
they
where
were
like
so
anytime
cool.
there's the potential danger, they all like go
Even
into
Ren,
ready
like,
mode.
Even just Ren getting angry, they were like,
Yeah.
Character select player 1.
Stepped up. One of the biggest disappointments for this movie with me, and tell me if I'm thinking too hard about this, but that fight, Snoke down, they're all about to fight, red backdrop, looks amazing. It was really, I was rubbing my hands together, being like, John Williams, do your thing, baby. Here we go. Like, even if it's a song 30% as good as Duel of Fates, this is it. You're never going to get a better moment for a kick-ass new Star Wars song. It was
I
just-
don't
it was just-
remember the music at that point.
It was a more
was-
aggressive version of like Rey's theme, but it was just a remix again of everything. And this movie's soundtrack made me appreciate Force Awakens soundtrack a lot, but I wanted something new. And outside of like a Little Rose theme, there's really not much.
I would agree. I think this is a great soundtrack, and I have always made the case that like John Williams' significance to the success of Star Wars cannot be overstated.
60%.
Like it is so huge. I mean, talking about think about how terrible the Leia space scene would be without the music. Just as a perfect example of that, right? The score in Last Jedi is great, but so much of what is great about it is the ways that it taps nostalgia. There's very few moments that on my first viewing, maybe I'll get a little better sense of it after a while. There are very few new themes that really stood out to me.
Yeah.
And that was, I would agree, it was the first time I was kind of disappointed with that aspect of the music, even though some of the other uses of music in this film are just phenomenal.
It's a lot of Rey's theme, it's a lot of Jedi Steps, and it's a lot of March of the Resistance, which are all amazing,
Yeah.
but it's still a bummer that there wasn't a big, impactful new
Yeah.
sound.
Let's talk about those Praetorian guards though for a second. That scene was freaking awesome.
My theater lost it when he does like the quick lightsaber.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
it just goes
I
right
was-
through his head.
I probably missed like the next 5 seconds of the movie because I was just like,
Did you guys see that?
it went through his face.
Oh,
Yeah.
that one like hit the arc of electricity. It was just this big piff of like piece of
Yeah.
red plastic everywhere. Like, ugh.
Yeah.
God, I love that
Everything
scene.
about that action scene is real
And then the
solid.
the red wall catching fire. Oh, it was so good.
It was sweet. The lightsaber splitting in half. It's like, all right, I guess you got to wrap up the lightsaber story in some way. There's still something silly to me about the idea that Rey is equally as powerful in the Force as Ren. Like, I bought it in the first movie. because
she
he
was
damaged.
more powerful
I-
to grab the saber from him. And this one, they were on equal plane or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think
Red
the
was so injured in the last one. That's
I don't
why.
get the flying lightsaber twice thing.
I think the splitting of the lightsaber is a allegorical thing. I mean, I think
King
that
Solomon.
I think that it's that lightsaber, if you look across its history, is a thing that is used for great moments of light side triumph and horrible moments of dark side turning.
Yeah.
Like across the full spread of its use, right? I mean, it kills a lot of it kills the younglings, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, but it is also, the blade on which Luke learns to become a Jedi, right? Like, it is the one where he faces off against Vader, and so I like the splitting of the lightsaber as a representative expression of, Rey being on one side of that and Kylo being on the other side of it, and both pulling. And in the end, it is a weapon that has seen both of those two sides, and it comes apart.
Yeah.
It was just poorly made.
That's true.
Yeah, right.
That's it.
Also, is
Like
it too
Anakin
much,
just didn't
fell
put it
apart.
together very well.
Yeah.
Is it too much to ask Ryan Johnson? How great would it be if Rey just let go super hard and then it flew back and hit Kylo Ren in the face? That's good comedy.
It's a classic.
This circles back, by the way, to this. I think this is my last complaint thing that I'm going to bring up, and then I'll shut
The
up.
last complaint.
Is that I feel like this movie suffers a little bit, not as bad as this other movie, but it suffers some of the same problems that Thor Ragnarok has.
Ooh, interesting.
In diminishing tension through humor. I completely support the goal of having some funny moments in a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
But I think there's times in this movie that going for the sight gags or the little jokey lines diminishes what would otherwise be a more powerful, tense scene.
I agree with that, and I think part of the problem is if you didn't have it, it would be a super dark film.
Yes, it would.
And this is a family film. I hate to say that, as
It's Star
as a
Wars.
storyteller
It's a movie for kids.
yeah, as a storyteller, you want it
Yep.
to be really dynamic and like speaking like a very have a very focused message. But you do need those moments for kids and the weird aliens and all over the place, and that stuff has to be in Star Wars films, and I think that's always gotten in the way in everyone, even the best films. I think maybe Empire's the only one that really got away with it a little bit, but where it was that was a very kind of empty film if you really think about it.
Well,
Desolation everywhere.
Well, let's get specific. I think it's fun to get specific. Did you guys have a problem with the joke in the beginning with Poe pretending that he
loved
couldn't
it.
hear?
Yes, I hate it.
I love that. At that point,
it's better in retrospect when you realize he's stalling. It is a very like
Hux?
Star-Lord kind of a stall, though.
Yeah.
I love Hux just being the worst person ever. Like,
Yeah,
just
I-
an idiot. And for him to he gives this ridiculous speech. I was laughing at that maybe more than the Poe thing.
Yeah.
Like so over the top, like just delivering this we're gonna destroy them all,
Yeah.
obliterate them message, and then Poe's just like, hello.
Isn't it?
I thought it was great.
Isn't it the same joke though? I love the joke too. I'm not putting it down by this, but just to defend it as a Star Wars joke, isn't it the same joke as Han Solo over the intercom in the Death Star? Like, how are you? Just the same
No.
idea of just getting colloquial in that extreme situation.
Say what you will. I mean, like,
I just
we're getting
did.
into that realm of having to like explain humor, which always makes it not funny. So I'm not gonna go too far down this way, but like, there's just no doubt that line from Han is great, and it totally works. And for me, that I don't think I can say that confidently about like, especially once we go down the like, let's turn it into a mom joke by the end, like.
What did he say about the mom?
Like
I don't remember
at the
this.
very end of that whole conversation, it's like, doesn't he say something like about like
His mom.
a
Yeah.
message? I have a
That-
message
that
for your
might be-
mom.
Oh, I don't
Like it
remember
just
that part.
feels too like colloquial and like anachronistic to like modern,
Sure.
modern
Phone
slapstick
calls?
humor.
I'll agree.
Or whatever.
I'll agree with the last part, but
I don't know.
the fact that Hux was not getting it, and then the second in charge just had to be like, he's freaking stalling,
Right,
and then
right.
that guy kind of took the reins.
Yeah.
I loved that.
This movie really turned Hux around for me in general. I thought Force Awakens, he was so distracting. I just hated every time he was on screen. But this time, he was surprisingly funny. Okay, what about the tickling Rey's hand with the plant?
I love that too.
And she's saying it's the Force.
That was fine.
That's
Okay.
fine.
What about the great gut punch of the Princess Leia message and
Mhm.
then Luke saying cheap trick?
I didn't like it when he said that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I did. because that's the way I was feeling. But
I mean, just in that moment, though, like, it doesn't matter what is said. It could be the worst joke possible or anything, but just what happens. Yeah, it could be just R2 farting or something. But in that moment, you just see this setup of like, what about this? And you're just like, oh God, like you melt as a fan, you just kind of melt in that moment.
absolutely.
Real quick, isn't it weird that like R2 just at one point was like, F everything, I'm just shutting down, so put a tarp over me.
Well, he keeps doing that. Like, I love that Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams just have no interest in C-3PO and R2-D2, and those characters feel like they're just wedged in here.
Right? You know, from a storytelling perspective, that's a big challenge, right? Because Luke or Han are characters in their own right that exist independently of their cuteness or their funniness or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually kill them. You can't do it with Chewie. You can't do it with C-3PO, and you can't do it with R2-D2. Nonetheless, you have to like pass the torch and to like a new group of characters and a new droid, right, in BB-8. And so you have this weird situation where like C-3PO and R2-D2 are there because we can't kill them.
Also, they
more
don't
than
age,
anything
so it
else.
works out
When
for us from a filmmaking
they were
perspective.
supposedly the storytellers that told the whole saga, right?
Exactly.
So like R2 in this film, it was just like I know Ryan wanted R2 there for that moment with Luke. Right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
amazing.
But that was kind of it, right? Like outside of that, it was just kind of like, what was he doing on? He was
Right.
just shut down again. Like,
Yeah,
does he
it's
just-
almost like he's like this.
Does he need a new battery? What's
yeah,
going
it's
on
almost
with
like
R2?
he's just like a little too old, you know, like he's kind of like not all there anymore, and he just sleeps a lot of the time.
Yeah,
and every
yeah.
once in a while, wakes up and like does something wise.
He's the grandma from Coco.
Yeah,
I mean, he
right.
could have used his thrusters and flown up there and been with Ray and Luke. And
yeah.
Yeah, there
I
isn't
still-
any of that.
I still like C-3PO being there for Princess Leia. I'm sorry, General Organa having that joke of like, oh, wipe that anxious expression off your face, C-3PO.
Yeah.
Just
That-
as dumb.
that
I
was
like
a
that
good
joke,
line.
but again, like compared to how much they were used in the original
Right,
trilogy, they are
right.
just like they're in it as much as like Akbar, right?
Yes.
Yeah, at a
Yes.
certain point though, it's kind of like if you're going to continue to rely on them in the same way, this franchise will go even less of a distance than it already has been. So I think it's great
yeah.
to kind of move them
That's
off the
probably
table.
why
Focus
it's
on the
good
evil
that,
BB-8.
Yeah,
that Lucas didn't do this because he would have kept them
Oh,
in
yeah.
the spotlight.
Oh, in a big way. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Mopping up other little one-offs that we haven't talked about that we can get to real quick that we liked. I just want to mention, I love, basically because it's the same as an Arrested Development Season 4 joke with George Michael and Lucille 2, but I loved at the end of this film when Poe introduces himself to Rey, and it's like, oh, yeah,
yeah,
I
had
guess
the
so.
same-
Okay,
I was
okay.
like, oh yeah, those guys have not met.
I guess I've heard about you on the base. I
Yeah.
missed out on the hug last time.
Is there supposed to be a poorly communicated like love triangle going on here? Like, are Rey and Finn, are they supposed to be this like sexual chemistry that
Well,
we're just
they
not
had-
are they buddies?
There's
What is
more
going
than
on?
Force
They had
Awakens.
they had a
There's a-
moment in Force Awakens, right?
Yeah.
Like where it could maybe go somewhere.
But it
And
could
then-
also just be friendship, right?
Yeah, but her seeing Finn with Rose, that was clearly intended to be something from Rian Johnson,
They're,
right? Like,
they're all just going to kiss each
They're-
other with Maz Kanata in there at
There's
the
like
end of
4
9.
she was
people.
awesome, by the way.
Yeah.
I loved her scene in this.
There's a notable lack of romance in this movie.
Yeah.
Which, like the thing I was talking about earlier, where I think that there's a very purposeful use of the female characters of this movie, right? The absence of romance in this movie is not an accident, right? Like
Yeah.
that is a directorial and writing decision that was very clear from the start. Like, this is not going to be Empires where we saw Han and Leia fall in love, and like it's clear that Johnson was like, nope, we're not doing that.
Well, to the point that when Rose kisses Finn, it was like, what?
Yeah, it
What the
feels
hell you
out of
doing?
left
Hey,
field.
speaking of that moment
Yeah.
on Planet Loot Crate, when so they take those speeders out there and they're going for a while, right?
What are they doing?
And then they crash.
Yeah.
How fast did Rose and Finn or
Yeah, they'd be
whatever have
dead.
to get back?
That sled.
Oh,
that he
yeah.
created?
Oh, I thought you were gonna say like her colliding him would have
Flash.
killed them
Yeah.
because
Oh, yeah.
it would have.
Yeah.
Like that's the part that I was like,
But they got back to that base super fast.
They did.
What
Yeah.
was the plan? Were they gonna shoot?
I don't know what the plan was.
What were they racing across the
See,
desert to do?
This is what I'm talking about. There's just some stuff in this movie where
course,
it's like,
yeah.
why are you doing this? This doesn't make any
that-
sense.
Well, that's the last stand, though, right? Like that's like
So what were they gonna just
We have
run into the
nothing-
feet of the AT-ATs and call it a day?
they
Add
maybe take
Sorry.
out. Yeah, I mean that's it. That was the. I mean, it's the same thing as running, right? Like in the ship, it's running out of fuel. There's nothing left.
What did you think? And is there any precedent in the Star Wars universe for the idea of going light speed through a ship will destroy an entire?
That's the thing I
armada?
have the biggest.
It's
problem
very
with.
silly.
That's the thing I
It's
have the biggest
awesome.
problem with.
It looked
It was
great. It sounded
awesome.
even better.
But why not do that with one ship
Yes.
for
What-
the Death Star?
what ship?
Death Star 2.
That do they have a
X-Wing.
ship that is no? The X-wing like would have just been like throwing a pebble at a car. I think the whole point was that this one mothership was big enough for it to have actually made a difference.
But I mean, you throw that at the Death Star, though, you could take off a hunk of the Death Star. That might shut the whole thing down.
That is,
right?
yeah, that enormous mothership would have probably
So
taken
send
the
like
Death Star down.
4 of those out.
I don't think that they have like a
The idea of
backlog those.
weaponizing hyperspeed it seems like a bold move beyond even tracking in hyperspeed,
Mhm.
which I understand that they set up in Rogue One
Yeah.
in a clever, subtle way. But it seems odd, right?
I think it's also like a military strategy that maybe people are reluctant to use it in that universe because it might be considered dishonorable or like that's something that we don't do in conflict.
right.
You know, as
be.
dishonorable
We don't
as we can
ram
be.
the aircraft carrier into the other
yeah,
aircraft carrier.
right.
I like that. I'm going to go with that.
yeah,
Sure.
I'm gonna
And
go with
also,
that
I
theory.
think that if you look at the size, though, no other ship that the rebellion had would have been. You could not have used that. You couldn't have thrown an X-wing at the Death Star.
What
like
about the
that.
big gun shaped
This
one?
also veers into one of the areas of like Star Wars fan discussion that always like doesn't work for me, which is that like trying to find real world explanations
Mhm.
for the story of like
This isn't real.
laser swords in space.
Yeah. what they call
Like
laser
I
sword
think we
missile.
have to like look at it in the context of this is a fictional property
Mhm.
and they're going to do the things that service the themes and the narrative of their
As long as it gives the
story.
audience an F yeah moment.
yeah,
good.
exactly. Like in the balance between like, wouldn't it be cool if we had the ship go to light speed and ram into the enemy ship, and on the other side the guy in the writers' room who's like, well, that is not exactly the way that the Star Wars you know like
Yeah.
that nobody cares about that, right? They're gonna go for the cool moment.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If it was their go-to strategy, it wouldn't have felt like a powerful act
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
desperation.
Yeah, definitely.
I can't imagine what Ryan Johnson went through with like not only the actors being like Daisy Ridley and Mark Hamill being like, whoa, what's going on with my character?
Yeah.
Having to deal with that, but also Lucasfilm like trying to push this through. Like
The lore. Oh,
I'm doing new
boy.
things with the Force.
Yeah.
This whole
Uh,
thing is just generated by a committee, though, right? Like it's not like Ryan Johnson sitting there with his pen and quill and doing this all by himself. Like the amount of moving parts in this thing.
I don't know.
I know there was a lot of involvement with JJ.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, he had JJ change something in Force Awakens to set it up. I think Colin asked for something in Last Jedi. I don't know what that was, but
He has
That-
to lose his head, I think.
It is essential this character lose their head because their head comes back in the next one. Yeah, I don't know.
In the interviews, though, Ryan Johnson has certainly made it seem like,
blank slate. Yeah.
well, I'm sure it's just an army of approvals that he has to go through, but he made it seem like the big decisions of like Snoke and Luke going down, like at least germinated from his script, which is interesting. All right, guys, I think that's it. We want to reconvene for episode 9 in a couple years, maybe.
Well, we got to
Or
do that
Solo.
terrible Han Solo
Han Solo.
movie.
Hey,
Han Solo.
nobody needs this.
All
You're right, but I can't wait to see it.
All right, thanks for sticking
have
with
to
us,
watch it, I
everybody.
guess.
Really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. Also, Benicio del Toro's in this film. But until next time, this is Game Informer signing out. Bye, everybody.
Bye.